Flood concerns growing for the valley, especially as more and more weather models start to come into agreement on how much rain, the duration, and the timing of our atmospheric river that hits on Thursday into Friday, and perhaps more in store after that. So our excessive rainfall forecast, you can see we're now in the moderate risk from the Weather Prediction Center. Slight risk as we head a little bit farther to the north and south out of the Central Valley. And then we still have a marginal risk for the Sierra. All of these regions will be watched as we dig deeper into our forecast, especially Thursday and through Sunday when we have our flood watch in effect. Rainfall plus runoff. Those are the two things that we're going to be most concerned about. Now, keep in mind, we've had a lot of low elevation snow with about 1 to 3 feet of snow in some of those foothill places. And now we're going to get rainfall on top of it. We'll see that rainfall and runoff most problematic below 4,000 feet with street flooding, creeks and streams flooding, as well as river flooding. We've got a couple of data points that we're going to be watching for the possibility of some flooding by late Friday through early Saturday. Our cold low pressure system still working its way through the Pacific Northwest. We have more snow that will be hitting some elevations around 2,500 feet. That being true even before this atmospheric river, which has a great tropical connection, starts to move our way Thursday into Friday. So again, we're going to add more snowfall and rainfall to the forecast before we even get to that atmospheric river, which is now forecasted to be a Category 4, which will be primarily hazardous with some benefits for some of those reservoirs and some of those tributaries that are still in need of water, especially Shasta and Trinity in the extreme northern part of the state. Our low pressure system, like I said, this is our last cold low before we get to some of those warmer storms, still working its way through the Pacific Northwest with some showers starting to pop up just along the northwest coast. This is what we'll track tonight through our Wednesday forecast and giving us still our winter weather advisory in place from Wednesday morning at 4 a.m. until 1 p.m. At that point, we'll start to see things winding down, but 2 to 6 inches of additional snow still coming our way with travel impacts, potentially along many of those mountain and some foothill roadways, with our winter storm warning continuing until 10 a.m. on Wednesday. 10 to 30 inches of additional snow possible in some pockets in that area shaded in pink, with our snow level again down to about 1,500 feet, but mostly at about 2,500 feet is where we'll see that accumulation, with more travel concerns for our Wednesday. And we only have about a 24-hour break before even more rain and snow heads our way. So here's a look at the snowfall totals coming our way for tomorrow morning through the early afternoon. About 5 to roughly 10 inches of snow, but a little bit farther up towards Plumas and even Lassen counties could see additional snowfall that could accumulate in anywhere from about 1 to 5 feet. Rainfall amounts, they're going to be fairly weak, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch for the valley and foothills. So that's not necessarily causing the huge amount of problems. It's what's to come after that. You can see tonight we basically have clear skies until we get to the very early morning hours of Wednesday. That's when we start to see this line of precipitation moving on through that I-80 Highway 50 corridor. Gets hit pretty good for our snowfall. And then we'll start to see that slide southward along 88, 89, many of those mountain passes south of Highway 50. Now we'll hang on to the snow until about 10 a.m. and then quickly start to see some clearing after that. We'll still see some pockets, and that's why some areas north of Highway 50 still getting in on some of those additional accumulations. So the main impacts with these early storms late last week, early this week, were snow and travel. We were in the extreme and high categories for impacts. Now we're going to shift things around a little bit. Rain, travel, and flooding go into the higher impact zone, whereas snow and wind are going to be more in the moderate range. So it's a complete flip-flop from what we've been seeing with those cold storms that were bringing the snow so far down the hill, lots of chaining up down in the foothills, and then all-out road closures at times from many mountain roadways. So moderate impacts will be our snow accumulation. This is going to take us from Thursday all the way through Sunday, and you can see about 12 to 18 inches at Echo, whereas Donner, about another 2 feet to almost 3 feet of snow. You go up to Lassen, and that's when we get into more of that 5-foot range of additional snowfall. That is true as well for Carson and Ebbets passes and Sonora passes. Many of those roadways are closed for the season because they just haven't had time to clear it. So we can't even get up across many of those passes south of Highway 50. Major impacts is going to be the rainfall, and you can see it right here. The number is pretty much telling the story. Grass Valley with snow right now gets 5 to 7.5 inches of rain. Sonora with snow right now on the ground, 5 to 7.5 inches of rain. In the valley, 1 to 3 inches of rain, and that will hold true as well along the coast, where some of those regions, the coastal range as well as the Santa Cruz Mountains, could have some problems with the rainfall coming down off the hill, impacting a lot of the creeks, the streams, the roadway flooding. Big Sur, we've already had a big slide there, so we have a possibility of more mud and rock slides occurring by the time we get through the accumulated rainfall by the end of the weekend and into early next week. So this is a weather story that will linger even after the precipitation stops. In terms of the winds, could take down some power lines as well as some tree branches and possibly some weakened trees by earlier season storms could come down as well, because these wind gusts are going to be anywhere from 40 to 45 miles per hour very late on Thursday night through early Friday morning. So this is an overnight event. Once again, could have some power outages to wrap up this work and school week. And those wind gusts up in the Sierra are going to be closer to about 80 miles per hour. So blowing, drifting snow, some real difficult travel for our Friday in the high country. Atmospheric river storm number 1, from what we're counting, hits on Thursday with significant rainfall in the forecast, high snow levels, lots of rain, and moderate flood risk. Now, the time is right now to prepare for this flooding. Have a to-go bag ready with important documents. Prepare a flood kit, including batteries, flashlights, food, water, and additional items is to fill up charge your car, and then charge phones, sign up for your county's emergency alerts. That is really helpful. We saw so many evacuations happening with the New Year's Eve storms, and could see that happening again with some of those rivers starting to get very high by late Friday into early Saturday morning. You don't want to be stuck there in the night hours with very little light and having these evacuations take place. All right, let's look at the Sierra snowpack, because that is also a big part of this story. We have a lot of snow, and in some places, historic snowpack in the high country. And part of that is going to start to melt. So just taking a look at the sheer numbers, you can see the impressive amounts of snowpack that we have, not only in localized areas, but statewide. We're at 192% of average. So we have an incredible snowpack going on. Now, there's a couple different parts of this story. First of all, we're going to talk about how low the snow is. And you can see the big gains that we saw from earlier in the water year until our current situation here, where not only the extent of the snow is pretty good, but also the depth of the snow is really good throughout this year. And some areas are close to our records. That being true for the Southern Sierra, which is currently running above that 1982-83 max snowpack. Right now we're above that. We could jump a little bit above that for the coming storm systems, but it's really going to be dependent on how high that snow level actually goes. Looking at some more numbers for some of the ski resorts, just in the last 5 days, we put another 10 to 50 inches of snow in the ski resorts. So what does it look like in terms of their entire season? We've had about 550 to over 600 inches of snow this season alone. So our percentage of average for many of the ski resorts are at about 150 to over 230% of what we normally see. Now, there is a caveat. 2017 was our most recent year where we had huge snowpack numbers. We saw flooding in the valley. Well, the snow water equivalent. So if we were to take that snowpack, we melted it down, how much water would we get out of it? Well, in 2017, we had a lot of water in that snowpack, a lot more than what we currently have. We've had a lot of cold storms. It doesn't have as much moisture. So the snowpack's really cold right now. And what we're hearing from water officials is because of the difference in this line right here, where our current line is with our snow water equivalent and 2017, is that it's going to take a lot of thermal energy to melt that snow, which is some good news, because that means we'll have a slower melt with that snow. But we've had a lot of low snow. So snow weight and snow loading is starting to become a big story, especially for the lower elevations, where some of those roofs, if they're not cleared out from the current snowpack, could actually collapse. All right, let's take it step by step here. Most roofs can actually withstand about 20 pounds of weight to it. Our snow has been really fluffy snow for the most part. Now, lower elevations were more in that about 10-to-1 ratio, and we've had about 12 inches, but in some places about 24 inches of snow. So that's going to put about a truck and a car on top of it. We haven't really had that wet snow, but that's where we're headed. We're looking at that 5-to-1 ratio in some places in the Sierra, not necessarily 24 inches of it. So we're not expecting, 5 or 6 trucks of snow coming on top and the weight of it. But we will see the impacts because we're going to get rain on top of all that snowpack. So that's going to add additional weight. Again, that's going to add more water to the snowpack, meaning we're going to have a lot of issues if that snow isn't cleared off those roofs to get the weight reduced and the roofs being able to handle what's coming our way. Another key point is water officials are saying, please let it be known. This does not look like it's going to be a repeat of 1997 when we had catastrophic flooding throughout the Central Valley. But there will still be the water impacts, including the roads, the rivers, and the creeks getting very high with the snow melt below 5,000 feet. The valley is a floodplain. It sits right at the base of mountaintops that go 9,000 feet plus. Our passes aren't quite that high, but we've been showing pictures of how it's just a wall of snow up along the passes as snowplows have continued to just kind of press it off the roads, and it just keeps building higher and higher. Well, now we're going to see snow above our passes on Thursday into Friday, both along 80 and 50. These are just 2 roadways that we'll use as an example. You can see our snow line will be above the passes. By Saturday and Sunday, we'll see a little of that pressure released from all that rain in the higher elevations because that snow line will come down. So we'll start to see some of those flood concerns be alleviated from additional water coming down the hill. It's just the unfortunate part is that there is the delayed effect of everything kind of moving its way downstream. All right, so we get to our winter storm watch here. I don't want to discount the fact that we'll still have a lot of snow. So we'll have those travel impacts for the high country with snow down to about 6,000 to 6,500 feet. Again, we talked about that 1 to 5 feet of snow coming in. But the big news is going to be this flood watch that is now in effect with a lot of the rainfall and runoff impacting those lower elevations. For our reservoirs, we're in a pretty good place right now. We haven't quite heard from Department of Water Resources or the Bureau of Reclamation if they're going to be doing additional releases. We hope to find out that information on Thursday, but you can see here we're only at about 60 to 75% full right now for our northern California reservoirs. The central areas are at about 45 to 80% of capacity. I do want to point out in my talks with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which set the rules and the standards for when water needs to be released or when it can be held, they said a lot of our Central Valley reservoirs and tributaries are really narrow. So they've got to get water moving through a lot quicker so that when more comes in, they have the capacity to move that water through all the channels and the tributaries, the reservoirs, and downstream out towards the Delta, or whether it's through the California aqueduct. So we definitely want to save that water. It's just they might have to be starting to let out water right now just to prepare for what is our bigger concern and the possibility of flooding. So we've got 6 monitoring sites on the rivers that are going to be above flood stage. So I do want to highlight just a couple of these right now. The McCollumney River at Modesto is going to be sitting pretty good here until we get to late Friday, when again we have the cumulative effects. Then we get to that crest overnight Friday into early Saturday into Saturday afternoon. That's when it's expected to reach that flood stage. And then we'll look at McCollumney River also at Benson's Ferry. Pretty much the same time frame. Right about Saturday afternoon is when we see it crest at that flood stage. The other one, and we covered this so much during our earlier winter storms, is Cosumnes River at Michigan Bar. That's going to be over towards the Wilton area, and it's expected to crest a little bit earlier than the McCollumney. That's going to be Friday late in the day hitting that crest, the way that things are shaping up right now. So those are the 3 spots that we're locally looking at. There's 3 more spots throughout the state that also are expected to reach that flood stage. We still have the rain and snow coming in for our Wednesday morning, and then things will start to clear out. Again, a window of opportunity that lasts roughly 24 hours, because here's that big fetch of moisture right out in the Pacific, and you can see it just bullnose right through that 80-50 corridor just to the south here. That's why the Santa Cruz Mountains, I am a little bit concerned about some areas in that region. Snow will continue for the Sierra, but that higher elevation snow is likely Thursday into Friday, and then we'll see that colder air still work in. Yeah, believe it or not, we're still likely cooler in our long-range forecast, but unfortunately, look at this. Look at the dark shading right here through Southern California. A likely wetter scenario shaping up, which could kind of shift our flood concerns from extreme Northern California into Southern California by the middle part of the month. So a look at the 5-day forecast for the mountains. If you are planning any travel, it is highly discouraged through this coming weekend. As we've been showing time and time again, people have been getting stuck. Emergency officials are saying, hey, we got a lot of emergencies we're trying to respond to here. We have a slight chance of those thunderstorms on Friday. Again, that will come with some gusty winds, but it's mostly rain for the foothills, with our 10-day forecast showing what looks to be a pretty good flooding situation shaping up by the time we get to the weekend into early next week.